I see people talking about why the government should take away the 501c3 status from churches. Why are they getting tax exemption? Basic idea is that behind that, I believe, is that the state is recognizing that they should not take that which belongs to God.
Right.
Right? The church should do its work within the jurisdiction that is set for the church, and the state should remain within its jurisdiction. It's in the blurring of those jurisdictions that's where the tension happens. And I think keeping those spheres separate and sovereign is the right way to go about it. At the same time, I do believe that while the state has the responsibility to deal with crime issues, that's the sword of justice, right? When crime happens, the state gets in, but we don't expect the state to get into the sin matters. The church has that role to wield the sword of the word. However, I do believe in this, though, right? Every sin is not a crime, but every crime is a sin. It's a moral issue. So, church does have some role in terms of coming and informing the civil magistrates as to how to conduct itself. There's a moral duty there. That's why I believe. And the other challenge that we have is also church understands the fact that from a biblical standpoint that we have to approach within our jurisdiction two people in terms of fulfilling our duties towards them in loving them, because the underlying idea behind that is that we all are created equal. So we cannot be tribal in that regard. Christians have the mandate to reach out to people regardless of the fact who they are and what they believe in when they are in need and support them. I wonder if state would have that, unless, of course, if they had founders like here in America who were writing the Declaration claiming the truth, that we hold this truth to be self-evident, earlier sacred, right? That we all are created equal. It's coming from somewhere. Not all worldviews offer that kind of idea that would need a society to flourish. So I think church, I would say, have to come alongside informing and providing that basis that is necessary for flourishing.
Oh, that's great, Jacob. And man, there's a lot here. I have several things written down to mention, but maybe one thing in terms of stepping back, I mean, even this discussion about the role of the church and the state is a uniquely Christian idea. And America has a uniquely American way of speaking into that relationship. Let's go back to the ancient world. You had the notion of a sacral state, right? If you think of a Venn diagram, right, and these two circles, and you have the state and you have society, the state circle covered all of society, right? And political power and sacred religious power were fused. You worshiped the pharaoh, you worshiped Cyrus, right? Or in the Greek city-states, the government determined what your religious duties were to Athena or Apollo or whoever the city's patron god was. So church and state were fused in the ancient world, right? After the incarnation, the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, there's a new order in the world, and the church is born, right? And you fast forward, excuse me, you fast forward to Bishop Ambrose in Milan and Emperor Theodosius. And Theodosius is now a Christian emperor, and yet he's also a Roman emperor. And how do the Romans maintain power? They slaughter weak people. And there was an uprising in Thessalonica. It's a long story, but he sends in the Roman soldiers, and they slaughter 7,000 women, children, and citizens, right? And that's just how Romans maintain power. Well, he comes back, and he comes to take communion, and Bishop of Milan meets him at the door, and he puts his hand up. There's tons of great paintings about this episode.
Yeah, it's great.
And he says, "You cannot enter. You have blood on your hands," right? And what would Julius Caesar have done? He would have chopped off Ambrose's head and marched into the church, right? But no, Theodosius actually says, "You're right." I mean, I don't know if he said those words, but he basically says you're right. And he respects the authority of the bishop of the church to impose the church's authority on him as the Roman emperor. And over a period of months, he does penance and he's restored and he's finally able to take communion. But you see a new principle at work here. the church has a role, a legitimate role that the state must respect. And so that principle is carried through to our tax issue that we're talking about in the 21st century. But that's the principle at stake. The church has an authority independent of the state. The state has to respect it. It cannot impose its authority on the church, and the power to tax is the power to destroy. Now, in through Christian Europe, you have Protestants and Catholics. What's the division of power between the church and state? And that wasn't always pretty, and there's always tussles. In America, for a lot of reasons that we probably don't have time to get into, we went the route of separating ecclesial authority from state authority. What was it going to be, the Baptists or the Congregationalists or the Anglicans or the Quakers? Right? Historically, America had religious diversity, and so that ecclesial question was already complex in America. And so historically, we've been bequeathed a situation where, yes, the state must respect church authority, but no church is going to dominate state authority, no single denomination, right? And so anyway, just a broad sweep of kind of just to give some context for people of kind of how we got where we were, where we are.
And what's important with this, though, is that there wasn't, and sometimes our atheist friends will make the mistake of thinking secular somehow means ollie oxen free. There's no moral guidelines whatsoever. That any every religion holds the same tacit weight morally, and that's just simply not true. There are reasons. We are talking about though the state doesn't bow to specific tacits of a specific faith, there are fundamental aspects that we as a culture assume, and those are Christian aspects, those are Western aspects. Muslim aspects, true to Muhammad, would be actually foreign. There's a reason why, say, female genital mutilation is still illegal, or polygamy is not legal in this country. There's aspects of that you can't marry a 9-year-old. All of these things play into a commonality, because if you lose that grounding, that aspect of faith informing our authority, then you've lost it all. And that's important. My concern is, through this discussion that we've seen with people talking about that, there seems to be a tacit assumption that government sets the standard for morality. And I don't know how many times you've heard that a lot of people will assume because it now is legal, therefore it is moral. So when all the marijuana laws passed for recreational marijuana, all of a sudden they go, well, I'm not breaking the law anymore, therefore I'm not sinning. And that's a mistake. And I tell people, you know what? Adultery is legal in this country. That doesn't mean you should do it. There's something to be said for morality that rises above the simple aspect of the law. And we have to be careful in that the church needs to inform the government much more than the government needs to inform the church. It usually is a one-way street.